It's fair to say this is one of the most hotly anticipated cars in years, if not decades. It's the all-new Land Rover Defender. It has been more than a decade in the making, and it's finally arrived in Australia. So, does the newcomer live up to the legend? It doesn't take a genius to work out that new and old are very different vehicles. You get it from the outside, you get it from the inside, and you get it the second you get behind the wheel. The classic Defenders were pretty rudimentary bits of gear. They were focused unbelievably on off-road, very little to do with on-road, and you got that as soon as you started driving them. This one has polish. It actually handles surprisingly well. It's certainly got decent comfort levels, and it's an easy thing to get around in. The steering is a fraction slow, but that's almost a good thing because you've got plenty of weight, and if you go tilting it around too much, you're going to get some lean going on. So I guess some old school Defender there, but pitch it at a corner and it hangs on really nicely. It's also a big car, and it's certainly got some weight to it, some gravity, and you certainly feel that when you drive it. One of the big differences with the new Defender is the model range. Instead of just being one or two models and some special editions here and there, it has a massive breadth in terms of what's available. So you can get obviously short wheelbase, long wheelbase, the 90 and the 110. You can then get various specification levels from pretty basic all the way up to the full leather clad and all the bells and whistles. And then there's the choice of 3 engines. So a couple of 4-cylinder turbo diesels, you'd imagine they'd be the most popular ones. And this one, an inline 6-cylinder. It's an all-new engine. It's a 3-litre turbocharged engine, but it's also got an electric supercharger as part of a 48-volt mild hybrid system. And it's not short on grunt. You've got 294 kilowatts and 550 newton meters of torque. Certainly not lacking for anything in terms of punch. The minute you step on it goes really well. Revs out cleanly, plenty of torque, got the muscle. Doesn't quite have the fuel economy of a diesel, but for kicking around town and towing things, it'll do the trick. There is no shortage of options for the Defender as well. You can really customise the car, from wheels, side pods for storage, roof racks, an Australian specific bull bar, all sorts of trims and colours. The list just goes on. Even with the seats, for example, you can have a standard 5-seat layout, you can get a 6-seat layout with a jump seat in the centre here, or you can get a 7-seater, so a third row of seats, at which point that jump seat gets taken out of the equation. Often we talk about new models when really they're not that new, they're just an evolution of the previous car, but in this case, this one really is all new. And you get that by looking at the basic makeup of them. So you go to the original Defender, you've got a steel chassis, an aluminium body, and you can only get it with a manual gearbox. The new one has a aluminium chassis, mostly steel body, and you can only get it with an automatic. So really the only thing that is really shared between these two is the badge on the bonnet. And even inside, it is completely unique. I can't see anything in here that is remotely close to that classic Defender. Sure, the themes and the general layout and so on, yes, they've followed it, but it's got a more modern flavour to it. You've still got flashes of utilitarian, but mixed in with a bit of technology. Digital instrument cluster, digital screen in the centre, but some thoughtfulness in terms of storage areas and the overall layout. And some real cleverness in terms of the design. So the basic structure of the dash doubles as a grab handle. You've also got some really cool storage in there, so it looks good and it's functional. But of course, the big thing with the Defender is what it's like off-road. Is it as capable as the old one? Well, there's certainly a lot more to it in terms of the electronics, in terms of the settings you've got to adjust. A lot of its off-road goodness comes down to the core architecture. Sure, it's based on what sits under a Discovery, but it's been seriously strengthened. The chassis and its recovery points have been engineered to handle a 6.5-tonne snatch load. For the first time, the Defender 90 and its longer 110 sibling have the same rear overhang, all part of the brilliant approach and departure angles, which are 38 and 40 degrees respectively. For this 110 we're in, there's also a super long wheelbase of just over 3 metres, which is not only longer than a Discovery, but also 172mm longer than a 200 series Land Cruiser.
Now, very unfamiliar to Defender owners is independent suspension front and rear, but without the axle and the diff pumpkin hanging down, it actually has more clearance than the previous car, up to 291mm with the air suspension in its highest mode. The new Defender can wade through water measuring up to 900mm deep, and the electrics are all rated at IP67, so that means they're dust and waterproof.
Whereas with the old car, you had the mechanicals doing so much of that off-road work. This time around, there's more electronics involved. You've got electronic differentials, you've got traction control, you've got that adjustable high air suspension, a whole bunch of stuff going on to try and keep you moving. It works. So yes, the new Defender lives up to the name in terms of its off-road capability. It's incredible not only how much it can do, but how easily it does it. On top of that, it brings next level refinement and comfort, almost discovery levels from that perspective, which leaves it in sort of some weird ground. I can't imagine too many of the Defender faithful gravitating to this and saying, wow, that's the car I've been looking for. But that said, some of them may have matured and said, I need some comfort, I want something that's going to be more of an everyday car. For that, it's going to tick a lot of boxes. There is one big question mark though, and that's what it's going to be like 10, 20, 30 years down the track. That's where Defenders made their name, was longevity, was the ability to just keep going and going and going. Will the new Defender have that? Time will tell.